whoever gets selected number 2 overall in that situation, yeah, you add them to Hagens and Minton and Letourneau and Zellers and Husadinov if you want. Like, sure. But, you wouldn't be relevant for at least 3, 4, 5 seasons in terms of a team that could probably maybe make the playoffs, let alone contend for a Stanley Cup. So Sweeney impression is hilarious and spot on. Don, how come the Bruins gave up so many grade A chances? Because we have a good goalie. WTF. Well, thanks, James. I appreciate that compliment. And
You're listening to the PuckUps podcast. It's time to hit the ice with Brian DeFelice.
Welcome into episode 38 of the PuckUps podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, and thank you all for joining me. On today's show, we're going to touch on the Boston Bruins' most recent signing, the suspension handed down to Charlie McAvoy, and we'll finish off with comments and questions from you, the listeners. But first things first, if you haven't done so already, please go ahead and subscribe to the PuckUps on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else that you get your podcast. And to get in touch with me or be a part of the show, you can email me, info@thepuckups.com. You can tweet at me on X at @BrianDeFelice_. You can tweet at the show at the PuckUps, or leave a comment on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, anywhere the show has a social media account and post content. Now, before hopping into the Charlie McAvoy conversation and our listener Q&A, we have to start off with the most recent Boston Bruins signing. On Thursday, they extended forward Lukas Reichel, who was an RFA, to a one-year extension through the 26-27 season at a cap hit of $950,000. How do you feel about the deal? In a vacuum, I like it, and here's why. Reichel has youth, he has speed, and he has skill. Is he raw? Yes. Is he a proven commodity? Is he a guaranteed part of the Boston Bruins' long-term future? No, and no. That's going to be on the player to prove himself next season. But the Bruins took a flyer on Reichel this past year, sending a 6th-round draft pick to Vancouver for what is, let's call it, a classic reclamation project. Now, I don't know if Reichel pans out in Boston. However, a one-year extension for under $1 million, I have no issue with that term and that dollar amount. It's pretty simple. They're giving Reichel a full off season and a full year in the Bruins organization to see what they have in somebody that they only had on the roster or the organization, because he did spend some time in Providence this past season, for a couple of months. It's not enough time to really see what the Bruins have in him. Obviously, Reichel has bounced around now from Chicago to Vancouver, now to Boston. And he's only 23 years old, I think. So he's bounced around a little bit, and teams, they've had a short leash with him. So we'll see. I don't dislike the deal. I don't dislike the player or the potential. Obviously, he has some proving to do. But if the Bruins are going to take a chance on a player, I would rather that player be one that has youth, speed, and skill. And Reichel has all of those things. If he doesn't pan out, well, it's a short commitment and it's short money. Okay, but hopefully, we'll see. Hopefully he pans out. And like I said, if not, it's not the end of the world. I will say, the Bruins entered this offseason only with 4 players from last year not under contract. Reichel was one of them. Okay, he was an RFA. No longer. Right now he's under contract. Jordan Harris, still without a deal, RFA. Andrew Peak, UFA. Victor Arvidsson, UFA. And a lot of people out there want the Bruins to re-sign Victor Arvidsson. So if you bring back Arvidsson, you just brought back Reichel. What exactly is changing with this roster? You have too many guys under contract. So I have felt all along this summer that the Bruins are going to try to move some contracts that currently have term on their roster. And somebody online mentioned to me in terms of Reichel that there are some expiring contracts in Providence, and Reichel may be a up and down type of player, so he might not really be hamstringing the Bruins NHL roster in terms of contracts, and that's fair. I'm not very privy to all the details about how that works. So sure, I mean, if you're telling me that there are Providence Bruins on expiring contracts and Reichel is going to be in Providence for much of next year, then okay. Same time, I would also say you'd rather Reichel be somebody that is on the NHL roster because of his speed and skill and youth. But again, if the player's maturity isn't there, then yeah, I guess he'd have to go back down to Providence. But we'll see with that. But in any event, I just feel like the Bruins are going to be moving contracts. I'm going to do an episode on it, I think next week. So I'll tease it and I won't go into too much, but there are about 5, 6, 7 players that I have circled in my mind as players that the Bruins are probably going to try to shop. And then there's a couple other players. There's a bit of a different category where there's contracts the Bruins can move for different reasons, right? Maybe a contract, maybe a certain player has a ton of trade value and they try to explore that. Or maybe somebody's an anchor of a contract. I think we all know who I'm talking about there. And they could, if they could, they would move that, but I don't think that's realistic. But there are about 5 or 6 names I have circled this offseason where I think they're movable contracts. And I think the Bruins are going to try to explore moving said contracts for one reason or the other to try to gain some roster flexibility and provide some room for younger players to take bigger steps going forward. So in a vacuum, I like the Lukas Reichel deal because it's short money, it's a short commitment, and it's a player with youth, speed, and skill. And so worth it to me. And we'll see how that pans out. Let's move along now to the other Boston Bruins news that came out this week, and that is Boston Bruins defenseman Charlie McAvoy being suspended 6 games by the NHL's Department of Player Safety for his two-handed Paul Bunyan chop job on Zach Benson in the dying minutes of Game 6 against the Buffalo Sabres. Before we get into the commentary on it, let's first listen to the ruling and the audio and video that the NHL Department of Player Safety put out regarding this play by Charlie McAvoy and why he was penalized 6 games.
As the video shows, late in the game with the score out of reach and the Bruins about to be eliminated from the playoffs, Benson trips McAvoy on an icing play, a dangerous trip for which he is penalized. After the whistle, McAvoy gets to his feet and pursues Benson to deliver some retribution. He charges towards Benson, who is skating in the other direction, chokes up, raises his stick over his head with both hands, and swings his stick violently at Benson, striking him in the arm. This is slashing. All parties agree that this is an intentional and forceful strike delivered to an opponent's body specifically for the purpose of retribution and message sending. It is important to note that players are not excused from illegal acts just because of a prior foul by an opponent. McAvoy has been suspended twice and fined once during his 573-game NHL career. The Department of Player Safety has suspended Charlie McAvoy for 6 regular season games.
There you have it. 6 regular season games for Charlie McAvoy. So the Boston Bruins will be starting next year without their top defenseman in the lineup for the first half a month of the year, right? So not ideal. Not ideal for the Boston Bruins. That was a costly mental mistake by Charlie McAvoy, whose wires crossed, and understandably so, right? Zach Benson, I mentioned it before the series began against the Buffalo Sabres. As a Boston Bruins fans, if you haven't heard of Zach Benson before, or you haven't watched him play, you'll know who he is by the end of this series because he'll be a thorn in the side of the Boston Bruins and their fans. He's cut from the same cloth. I'm not comparing him to Brad Marchand in terms of what his ultimate career will be, but he's cut from the same cloth as Brad Marchand. Undersized forward, tons of skill, great skater, but can really get under your skin. And we all saw Brad for years here in Boston, especially in his earlier years. He tended to cross the line a little bit, and then he toned it down later on in his career when he got enough suspensions and whatnot. Zach Benson, maybe he'll get to the point where he's toning it down too, but until he gets those slaps on the wrist, he'll probably continue to do what he's doing, which is being a very effective pest and, young, skilled forward. which is probably why some people are kind of confused about this play, because maybe they thought that aside from McAvoy and his suspension, which was deserved, like no doubt about it. You want to give McAvoy 4 games for that, 5 games for that, 6 games for that. I don't really care. I mean, I know it's subjective and people are saying, oh, it's too many games, one game too many, 2 games too many. Either way, it's a multi game suspension, whether it's 4, 5, 6, or 7 games. Like McAvoy deserved it. I think what people are annoyed about is the fact that Benson's slew foot on McAvoy was, I'm not going to say as dangerous because they're 2 different plays, but it's certainly dangerous. The audio even said as much in the clip I just played, where they deemed Benson's dangerous trip that was penalized. They made sure to say it was penalized in the play, not suspension worthy, but he got a trip. So hey, don't look at us. Our refs called it on the ice, trip. But people obviously felt like Benson should have gotten some sort of supplemental discipline for that slew foot. I mean, sure. At the end of the day, Benson getting a game or 2 or 3, it doesn't change the Bruins' fortunes to start next year. I mean, I understand it makes people lose faith in the process of the Department of Player Safety, which they've been getting it wrong for years. It's nothing new. I don't think that when it comes to the Department of Player Safety and officiating on the ice, that hockey fans are ever going to be satisfied with the product that they're seeing. And it is what it is. I mean, that's always been the case. But there's no doubt Benson got away with what could have been a minor suspension. I don't think Benson deserved anything crazy beyond maybe a couple of games worst case. But either way, even if he did get those games, how does that change the Bruins going forward next year? They're still without McAvoy, and they still would have been without McAvoy. So Benson, suspension or not, McAvoy deservedly got suspended for what he did. And let's be honest, that was a moment of weakness by Charlie. I mean, I don't know why he didn't just go up to Benson and drop the gloves and fight him or try to fight him. I mean, to do the Paul Bunyan axe is just, it was clearly short-sighted by McAvoy, because that's a suspension all day, every day. And now the Boston Bruins go into next year without their top defenseman for 6 games. So not great. That's basically how I feel about the situation. Like, McAvoy's suspension was deserved. Call it what you want. 4 games, 5 games, 6 games, 7 games. I don't really care. I mean, he should have gotten a hefty suspension, which he did. And, the video spoke to Charlie is a repeat offender. Not that exact play, but he's been suspended twice before. He's been fined. He has a history. So you can say what you want about McAvoy getting elbowed in the face by Vilmanis of Florida right before the Olympics and how that was missed and should have been suspended. I agree. It was missed and it should have been suspended. You can talk about Benson getting away with a bit of a slew foot and should have been suspended for maybe a game or 2 or whatever. I don't disagree with that either. Sure, there's inconsistencies with the NHL Department of Player Safety. The sky is also blue, right? So those things are true. McAvoy's gotten the short end of the stick in terms of being on the other side of dirty plays, that intentional or not, like the Vilmanis one. I don't know if that was malicious or intended to be a headshot, but it was, right? The result was a headshot. The Benson one clearly had some intent behind it. Doesn't excuse McAvoy's 2 previous suspensions, his previous fine, and what's now his 3rd suspension. So it is what it is. I think it's a story that's going to die down now that McAvoy's officially been suspended. So, it is what it is. Let's move along now to the mailbag segment of this show. Thank you all very much for always reaching out to me on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, email. I see all of your comments always. The support for the podcast has been great so far too. I appreciate the kind words and your comments and questions. So I tried to grab I think maybe 10 or 11 of these, maybe 12. And we'll just try to go through them and hear what you all have to say. So starting off, we have Marchand Fan 63 says, Brian, great pod. Loved the last episode. I'm not sure when this was from, but he says, what does it take to get Matthews? Ooh, okay. He's talking about Austin Matthews. He says, Patra, Elias Lindholm, 2028 first from Toronto, Laura and Hagen's question mark. All right, so off the bat, I'll just say this. I have never been one to be talented in terms of giving you mock trades that are accurate or realistic. So I'm not the person to come to from that. I don't really know. I really don't know. This question in particular, Austin Matthews, obviously there was a bit of a story the morning of the draft lottery where Chris Johnson of The Athletic had an article saying that Matthews informed the Maple Leafs that he's not sure if he's coming back to the Leafs next fall unless he, hears that there's a good plan in place that he can get behind and how they're going to improve the roster significantly in different areas. And there was a nearly 60% chance the Bruins were getting Toronto's first round pick, a top 10 pick when that story came out. And then that night, things kind of changed. We all know Toronto wins the draft lottery. They're expected to draft possibly Gavin McKenna. So did that buy the Maple Leafs a little bit more time with Austin Matthews? Maybe. Or maybe Matthews still wants out. Elliot Friedman came out on 32 Thoughts the following day after the draft lottery and said nothing's changed. Matthews still wants to hear a very, very convincing plan of attack this offseason by the Maple Leafs about how they're going to improve the roster the way he wants them to, or else maybe he'll walk or he'll, demand a trade, not walk, but demand a trade. You don't want that. You don't want a captain who wants out of your city, out of your team when you have a first round draft pick in the room either. That's not exactly a great culture set. So anyway, the Matthews thing is curious to me. I don't think he's going to be in Toronto long term, whether or not it's to start next year or something happens throughout the course of the season where it's kind of like a Quinn Hughes situation, Quinn Hughes 2.0, where he's just miserable and essentially is just demanding a trade. So we'll see. But as it pertains to this question from Marchand Fan 63, hope you're doing well in Florida, by the way, Marsh. But I don't think anybody's taking Elias Lindholm. I can tell you that much. Lindholm's back issues, his age, his contract, his no movement. First of all, that's the first problem here is Elias would have to agree to go to Toronto, which I don't know if he would do that. So yeah, this trade right here. I just don't think it's really anything that would ever happen. And yeah, Elias Lindholm, I think, is probably a non-starter if you're Toronto. But then again, you never know. Maybe they'd want to resurrect, him maybe in Toronto and whatnot. But ultimately, I don't think. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how. Again, I'm not good at these things, so I just see Elias Lindholm's name and I say no one's going to really want that contract, especially for Austin Matthews, right? So obviously the prize here is Hagen's and a 28 first from Toronto, which, who knows what that will be in a couple of years. Patra, Lorai, good pieces, but yeah. And honestly, from a Bruins perspective, I mean, I don't know, whatever. We have ad name here on Twitter. Well, let's call you Simon. Huh? Let's call you Simon. Simon says, Brian, I'm inclined to put this poor defense on a lack of true leadership within the players. The coaches likely pointed out over and over what needed to be fixed, but there was never a buy-in. No commitment from players to fix the details. They don't have a captain. They don't have a captain. Well, you raise a point that has been pretty subjective among fans and media alike the last little while. I think that video of David Pastrnak on Behind the B, where he was just giving it to his teammates verbally after the first period of Game 4 against Buffalo, whereas truly the worst playoff game I've ever seen the Bruins play, and that first period alone was probably the worst period of hockey I've ever seen the Bruins play. That kind of struck me and many others as a moment of leadership from Pastrnak. Charlie McAvoy all the while was quiet. Now, it was one clip. Maybe there's other times where McAvoy is very vocal, but I think right now, if you had to give people truth serum in that room, I think David Pastrnak is the Bruins captain, with or without the C currently. But to your point, I'm inclined to put this poor defense on a lack of true leadership within the players. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe a little bit. I mean, I don't know. This team overachieved from a results perspective all year. Now, we've talked about it in recent episodes that the Bruins, their shots against were among the most given up in the league. Their high danger chances against were some of the most in the league. Their high danger chances for were some of the worst in the league. So their expected goal differential was -30. Their goal differential in all reality, I think, was +22. So from a results perspective, this team that nobody believed in rallied and made the playoffs and got 100 points. I don't think you do that with poor leadership. I just don't. Now, the flip side is all those numbers I said, which is their expected goal differential being -30 and their chances for and against being lopsided. Okay, so that speaks to the process. But I think that they struggled generating chances for, and they gave up a lot of chances against because of a lack of talent, more so than a lack of leadership. I just think that the Bruins played a defensive style of a hybrid man-on-man versus and zone, and I just think that they struggled in man-on-man, and I think that teams play a defensive style of hockey when they lack speed and skill. When you can't take the game to your oppositions on a nightly basis, you kind of you try to cave in and you try to play a bend but don't break style of hockey. So I think that that's why the Bruins gave up so many chances, and that's why they created so few, because they didn't have the speed and the skill and the talent to overwhelm oppositions. So is that a leadership issue? At times, I think the Bruins had some leadership issues in the playoffs for sure. I mean, there were definitely key moments in that Sabres series where the Bruins just couldn't stop the bleeding and nobody stepped up. So I think that's valid. But from a macro perspective, I don't know. I mean, David Pastrnak had 100 points, like, for the 4th straight year. He's doing what he's supposed to be doing offensively. Is it his fault that, the rest of the team around him kind of lacks in talent? I think I have a hard time looking at Pastrnak and saying he's not being a captain. He's pulling his weight, right? Charlie McAvoy had a really bad playoffs, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many. But in the regular season, he had his most productive offensive career year of his career, arguably, his best overall year of his career. He took steps in the power play. He dealt with a lot of personal injuries. I don't know about you guys. I would not want to take a 85-mile-an-hour slap shot to the jaw and see my teeth and blood spread all over the Montreal ice back in November, right? We know what he dealt with the shoulder the year before, and so I think it's more to do with a lack of talent than it is a lack of leadership. I'm not saying that the leadership can't be better, but I don't know, man. I think that's my 2 cents. Is McAvoy or Pastrnak an alpha captain? No, I don't think so. So to your point there, I understand what you're saying, but again, they need more. They need more speed. They need more skill. They need more talent. And could they use more leadership consistently? Sure. But I think the first 2 things I mentioned are the Bruins' biggest issues. 7-year, Chris Stitch. Yeah, on theme here. McAvoy is good but not great. He's shown time and again in the postseason that he's not a true shutdown guy. Opponents' best forwards have no problem solving him. Yeah, I mean, I can't argue the postseason element of it. I don't think McAvoy's been great in postseasons past now, dating back. I'd say the Bruins' last three, at least their last three postseason runs, if not four, he's left me wanting more. Right? I mean, this past year against Buffalo obviously was not great for McAvoy, so chalk that one up as a loss. The last postseason run before that, they beat Toronto in round one in the Centennial season, and then they lost to Florida in the second round. I thought McAvoy was okay in that run. I thought that Bruins team was just completely overmatched by Florida, and even against Toronto had way more skill in their lineup that year than the Bruins did. But somehow, some way, the Bruins, without a true number one or number two center that year. I mean, Pavel Zacha, Charlie Coyle, they played well and they played above their skis. But that Bruins team, that was a Moneyball type Bruins team that year. That in the Centennial year, post Bergeron, post Krejci, no Taylor Hall, who got traded that off season. Tyler Bertuzzi left in free agency. Nick Foligno left, even though he was more of a role player. Dmitry Orlov, Garnet Hathaway, guys you brought in at the deadline the year before, they were gone. So that Bruins team, they were overmatched. I don't know if I blame Charlie McAvoy in the Centennial year for not getting past Florida, or that Bruins team they weren't very good, if we're being honest. I know they were a top 10 team in the regular season, I think, based on points, but that team was not that great on paper. The year before, the Centennial, or the record-breaking year, yeah, absolutely. Put Charlie up there with everybody who should have egg on their face for losing that series up 3-1. Charlie has his moments in the postseason where he steps up and crushes a guy, but yeah, I there's no excuse that record-breaking year where they collapsed to Florida. There just wasn't. Charlie was absolutely outplayed by some of the players in Florida. Brandon Montour, Aaron Ekblad, Gustav Forsling, like those guys were the best defensemen in that series. Charlie McAvoy was nowhere to be seen. If you were ranking your top 5 defensemen in that series, probably, yeah, I mean, Brandon Montour, number 1. Gustav Forsling, number 2. Ekblad, 3. I thought Gudas was effective in that series for Florida. I thought Dmitry Orlov was decent for Boston in that series. But, I mean, McAvoy was, he's just, I don't know. So that was that year. The year before that was against Carolina, where the Bruins lost in the first round to Carolina in Game 7. I thought McAvoy, again, I thought Carolina I thought they were the better team. McAvoy had that big hit on Sebastian Aho, but besides that, kind of forgettable of a series for him. The run before that, they beat the Capitals in round 1 the year after the COVID struck. And then, so, he was okay in that series. And then they lost to the Islanders in round 2, where McAvoy and everybody else kind of got bullied around, and they lost in 5 or 6 games. I think McAvoy had 1 goal in that series. So, okay, but wasn't great there. The run before that was the COVID bubble. He had a great hit on Jordan Staal in round 1 against Carolina. That Bruins team, they won the President's Trophy when the league got shut down, and then they just got completely outperformed by Tampa Bay in the bubble. They just weren't ready to go. The year before that was the Cup final. So yeah, I mean, listen, not to go on a rant here about all of Charlie's runs, but I would say in Charlie's first 2 years, he was very good in the postseason. His first 3 years, because the first NHL hockey he ever played was in the playoffs back in 2017. And he came onto the scene and we were all wildly impressed. So the year against Ottawa, check plus, A+ for Charlie that year, despite the Bruins losing in round 1. The following year, they lost to the Tampa Bay Lightning in round 2. They beat Toronto in round 1. I thought Charlie had a good he had a good playoff run that year in his first full season. He was effective against Toronto and shutting down Matthews. He was good against Tampa Bay, even though there was that one play where Kucherov kind of hooked McAvoy behind the net, and it led to a one-timer goal by Stamkos. Again, it was a missed call, but that's kind of memorable. And then the year later, they go on the cup run. He was very good. Everybody can take blame for the loss against the Blues, but you had to get there, right? So, yeah, Charlie McAvoy, good but not great. Certainly in the postseason, you can say that. In the regular season, he's been underwhelming in some recent years with some injuries, but I do think he was very good in the regular season this past year. We'll see what next year brings. Hope I didn't ramble too much on that one. But yeah, when you bring up Charlie McAvoy, he is kind of polarizing because when he first came into the league, he was the Bruins' most talented defenseman since Ray Bourque. I mean, I know you can sit. Chara was a different type of player, but Chara's raw skill wasn't that of a McAvoy. Like McAvoy's raw skating ability and puck handling and his hockey sense, like Chara was one of the greatest of all time because he understood how to utilize his body and what he knew what his strengths were and what his weaknesses were. But he was a very, if anybody saw Chara back in the 90s playing with the Lowell Lock Monsters or his time with the Islanders, Chara was very raw. And even with the Senators and the Bruins at times, like he had to find his way. Charlie, I think, had the most skill out of a Bruins defenseman probably since Ray Bourque. And then I don't know, he's just kind of plateaued at different times. And again, this past year in the regular season was good for him, and he won an Olympic gold medal with Team USA. But Charlie's kind of left people hoping for more at times. I guess I'll put it that way. This is from Mike8099M on YouTube. He says, I would take Dorofeyev in a heartbeat. He's a super clutch, and he's a shooter. Yeah, so this is from an episode recently with Shukri Wrights. Shukri brought up the idea of the Bruins going out there and offer sheeting Pavel Dorofeyev from the Vegas Golden Knights. Yeah, young player, great shooter, great scorer. Vegas does have some cap issues going forward, so I agree. I would take Dorofeyev in a heartbeat as well. This is Puck Picks on YouTube. I've stopped taking these press conference things seriously. It's just posturing and politics. Words are cheap. Let's see what kind of action takes place this offseason. Yeah, Puck Picks, I agree. I mean, she is referring to the Bruins ownership brass, management brass, and their end of season press conference. And yeah, I mean, I would agree. Most of it's posturing and politics, but you have to have them. You have to ask the questions. They have to answer the questions. And we had an episode breaking down some of the answers and takeaways from that episode or from that press conference and Puck Picks commentators in response to that. And I would agree. Talk is cheap. Action speaks louder than words. And we'll see what the Bruins do this offseason. CJ on YouTube. I want Sweeney to go all in and get Robert Thomas. I don't think you waited out. Otherwise, you were going to basically have the same team as last year. Enough of the endless fourth line signings with players that are on their way out of the league. Bring up Frederic Brunet, Matt Patra, if they're not traded for Thomas or a right-handed defenseman. Curious to see what St. Louis would want in return, especially since Montgomery has insights on most of the Bruins roster. I think Darren Radish ends up in San Jose. Lindholm needs to get to LTIR ASAP. Don't let him take up a roster space before the season starts. Otherwise, you're scrambling to find a last-minute replacement and screwing up the chemistry of your lines. You don't want to find you traded Patra and then need him at 1C or need him at center. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that Elias Lindholm is going anywhere right now. To be honest with you, CJ, we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong, but as far as all the stuff you said up front, yeah, I mean, going all in for Robert Thomas is interesting. If that costs you James Higgins, are you doing it? I don't like the idea of moving on from Higgins. There's something about moving on from him. I just do not like it. I like Robert Thomas a lot. I would give up pretty much everything else besides Higgins to get Robert Thomas. Speed kills. James Higgins has speed. The kid has speed. He can skate like the wind. He can survey the ice very, very well, can make plays at a high level. If you can get Robert Thomas without giving up Higgins, I know it's kind of like having your cake and eating it too, but I don't know. I think Dean Letourneau is going to be a hell of a prospect too. I think Letourneau could be a very, very, very good NHL player because there aren't many guys with his size and skill. And you're starting to see Letourneau figuring out how to utilize his size at BC this past year. So we'll see. I'm not saying that Dean Letourneau is going to be the next Tage Thompson, but you could easily see Dean Letourneau being a very difficult player to move away from the front of the net. He's got great skill. He's lengthy. He's got reach. I don't know. Letourneau could be a very valuable trade chip if the Bruins wanted to try to get a Robert Thomas. But I don't know if I see Robert Thomas going anywhere. St. Louis has a lot of draft picks. He had a great end to the year with them. I don't think he's going anywhere. I really don't. I really don't. But we'll see what happens with that. Let's go to Donald on YouTube. Donald says, you have to understand, the Bruins need young, high-end talent. That means you trade Pastrnak, who is 30 now, and will never bring the Bruins the cup. I would trade Pastrnak to San Jose for the second overall pick and Michael Misa. You get that package, and now you have the Bruins as a young, exciting team. And think of a team having Misa, Higgins, Minton, and Verhoff with the second pick. So, Donald, I mean, I appreciate the bold take and honestly the creativity. I mean, that is the type of big time hockey trade that that you once in a blue moon you see. I think honestly it would take more than Misa in the second overall pick. The Bruins have to get something else from San Jose for what is a bona fide top 5 forward in the NHL. So those types of players, I think you'd have to get more from San Jose for Pastrnak. But either way, if you trade David Pastrnak, and to Donald's credit here, he says that he doesn't think that Pastrnak will ever bring the Bruins a Stanley Cup. So if you're of the same mindset as Donald, if you're Don Sweeney and Cam Neely, if you don't believe in David Pastrnak, then yeah, then you might as well move him. I don't think the Bruins think the way that Donald's thinking. I don't think that a lot of Bruins fans probably think the way that Donald's thinking here. Although, again, like, to Donald's credit, he doesn't think Pasternak's going to bring him a cup. If that's the case, then yeah, try to get the biggest haul you can for him. Because the reality is, if you do trade David Pastrnak, your hopes of winning a Stanley Cup, or at least contending for one in the next 10 years, I think they're gone. They're gone. Like, you could possibly trade Pastrnak and bring in a Misa and a second overall pick, whether it's Verhoff or Stenberg or McKenna if he fell, or Reed, or whomever. Like, whoever gets selected at number 2 overall in that situation, yeah, you add them to Higgins and Minton and Letourneau and Zellers and Husadinov if you want. Like, sure. But, you wouldn't be relevant for at least 3, 4, 5 seasons in terms of a team that could probably maybe make the playoffs, let alone contend for a Stanley Cup. So just know that, right? Just know that if you're trading Pastrnak, your hopes of contending for a Stanley Cup, you just push them out at least probably 6, 7 seasons at least. So those scorers don't grow on trees. I don't know why right now you still can't have Pastrnak with a young core coming up soon. In fact, you can. Like, the Bruins don't have to get that desperate right now. You can win a Stanley Cup with David Pastrnak. He needs more around him. So the Bruins need to get creative, and I do think they have to get bold at certain areas. But if you trade David, say goodbye to any hopes of winning the Cup or contending for the Cup in the next 10 years, I think. And you know what? If you take that gamble and you win a Cup in 12 years or whatever, and that's worth it to you because you think that winning a Cup in 12 years from now is better than never winning a Cup at all, which in theory that's true. You go for it. But yeah, I just don't think the Bruins feel the same way as you, Donald, that they'll never win a Cup with Pastrnak, or I don't think they feel that way. But like I said, I appreciate the outside the box thinking. All right, let's go to Bruno Buck on YouTube. Bruno says, great conversation with Mr. Wrights. That's in reference to the episode with Shukri. I don't like giving up prospects for winning now mode. We keep doing that and it's not working. The best year was 2023 and we didn't win despite being loaded in all 4 lines and between the pipes. We need to plan midterm, and that involves the farm and being bold to bring up young, fast, elite talent that we already have instead of trying to Frankenstein them into Patrice Bergeron 2.0. Keep the identity, grit, hard to play, but add to it speed, talent. Giving up Hagens, Letourneau, Zellers, etc. in a trade is crazy. Bruno, I think that I feel the same way, ultimately. I really do. The one thing, the one player that really challenges me with this is Robert Thomas. And again, I don't think Thomas is going anywhere, but Robert Thomas is a legit 26, 27-year-old first-line center in the National Hockey League that right now would line up with the core or the prime of your core players like Pastrnak and McAvoy and Swayman and others, right? Zaka, Geeky, Zadorov, like whatever. So that's the one that kind of trips me up a little bit because of his position. Like Jason Robertson, Brady Tkachuk, I know people love those guys too, but the Robert Thomas, the difference for me is his position. To have that true number one center right now is instrumental. And I do think I might give up some of those prospects that you mentioned, probably outside of Hagens for Thomas. Now, there might be a lot of you who would give up Hagens for Thomas, or I don't know, but if you were to get somebody like Thomas, you have to give to get, quite frankly. But outside of him, I'm with you. I think that you just let the youth movement keep going on here and stop selling the farm, stop selling all these prospects, trading all these prospects for when the Bruins not in win now mode right now, basically. And that sucks to hear for David Pastrnak and for Charlie McAvoy, who feel like that they're approaching the back nine of their careers. They're at the turn, getting hot dogs. But guess what? As Don Sweeney said in the press conference to end the year, Patrice Bergeron, Zdeno Chara, Brad Marchand, David Krejci, those guys, they had to take a risk on the young players like Charlie McAvoy and David Pastrnak and others being effective players and helping them when they were in the back nine of their careers. So the Bruins have been very competitive for 99% of David Pastrnak's tenure over a decade now. And they're going to continue to be competitive, but you can't expect to be a Stanley Cup contender for 20 straight years. So I think patience is important here. But I question how much patience the Bruins will have. I just do. We'll see. This question is from Lil Chips 999. Is James Hagens untouchable in your opinion? If you can get Robert Thomas or any other legit long-term core player, but had to give up Hagens, would you? In my opinion, it's pretty close to untouchable. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you, man. I there's something about Hagens' youth. He's only 19 years old. Even a guy like Robert Thomas, Thomas is 27 to start next year. And yes, he fits the prime of Pastrnak and McAvoy, but there is an 8-year gap there between him and Hagens. Like I think I'm with you. It's tough to call anybody untouchable. Like who we talking Robert Thomas? We talking Connor McDavid early on Draisaitl, right? Like it really depends on what we're talking about. If we're talking Robert Thomas, which is what your question says, man, it's tough. It's tough because if Higgins did go the other way and you bring in Robert Thomas, do you keep a Letourneau and a Zellers in the process? I think James Higgins is untouchable for me in a Robert Thomas deal. I think I've come around to that. I don't think Rob. Yeah, I don't know. That's my answer. It's tough. It's really tough. I don't want to ramble, but I'm gonna say yeah, Higgins is pretty much untouchable for me in a trade for Robert Thomas. So I don't know. Maybe I'd regret that. Adrian on YouTube loved how honest and to the point this show was. Always great having Court's perspective and knowledge. So this is after the episode with Court Lalonde, Bruins diehards. Shout out Court. That episode was fun. Fun episode. Court did not make a lot of friends among Maple Leafs fans with that episode, but if you enjoyed Court on this show, he'll definitely be back. He'll be among my most recurring guests, I would say. That's a safe bet. James on YouTube, your Sweeney impression is hilarious and spot on. Don, how come the Bruins gave up so many grade A chances? Because we have a good goalie. WTF. Well, thanks, James. I appreciate that compliment. And yeah, give it a shot yourself. It's you gotta get the rasp in your voice and got a bit of a condescending tone there. And yeah, it's gonna be great. And you keep listening, I'll keep impersonating. So thanks, James. Take care. Gretz. Everything looks like the Bruins will shoot for Robert Thomas. Have I said Robert Thomas's name this episode? I'm not sure, by the way. But what would be the absolute most you'd be willing to give up for him? For me, it's got to involve at least one of those 28 first rounders. I just don't want them touching Minton or Higgins. Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm kind of with you on that too. I mean, Minton's also kind of untouchable to me. I would agree with that. Minton, I don't want going either. I would take, if you're asking me right now, would I want Robert Thomas next year at 27 years old plus for the next, 5 seasons at being a legit 1C, or would I want the next potential 15 years of James Higgins and Fraser Minton? I'm taking Minton and Higgins there. I mean, Robert Thomas is great. I don't know if he's worth giving up all that. The most I'd be willing to go up for Robert Thomas, again, to, I think, Don Sweeney fan, 6'3" earlier. I'm really bad at mock trades. It's not my forte. But I guess I'd be willing to give up, multiple first-round picks for sure. And then maybe like Letourneau and Patra or something like that. You'd have to give a significant package to get, especially if you're not giving Higgins or Minton in that deal. So you'd have to give it a lot. I'd be pretty much okay with anything outside of those players you mentioned. So yeah, that's that. This is from Lord XORR on YouTube. Love this podcast and Escape podcast. Shout out Bridget and Scott, my Escape pod co-hosts. I feel like both breezed by Sturm's comment about Higgins being a winger in 26-27 on Tuesday. So this is from, I think, last week after the press conference or something, or breakup day maybe. They drafted him to be a center. They have all off season and preseason to work with him at it. And we have a massive hole at 1C. Maybe that's getting filled via trade, but I suspect it won't. So it seems like a massive miss that they won't be planning for him to be 1C with Pastrnak to start next year. We all know he needs to learn the NHL game, but there seems like no better place to do it than a guy like Pastrnak on his wing. Would love to hear you or the three of you discuss on an upcoming pod, because this sent major alarm bells through me about the Bruins messing up another young prospect. So what I would say to this question, and I can definitely bring it up on the Escape Pod too to get Bridget and Scott's opinions on this, but I don't think it's that big of a deal because James Higgins will be a center in Boston. It just might not be to start next year. I wouldn't be surprised if he was a center at some point next year. And I think Marco Sturm has even said so himself that he views James as a center, but that he's not ready right now. So does right now mean next October through December, and then mid-season they'll make a transition? I don't know. I don't think that it should be a big worry that he's not playing with Pasternak to start the season. I mean, this is the long game we're talking with Higgins. So I would be surprised if he wasn't playing center at some point next year. I think he will. Somehow, some way, I think he will. There's so much to figure out with this roster. To what you alluded to earlier, do they bring in a number one center somehow, like a Robert Thomas? And if they are, is Higgins part of that deal? So, yeah, long term, I mean, James Higgins is going to be a Boston Bruin for the next decade and a half, right? We're going to look back at this and say, oh, we don't even remember him playing wing to start the 26-27 season. Don't forget, Patrice Bergeron played a lot of wing in his rookie. I know it's a long time ago, different era, but it's not uncommon for young center icemen to come in and play wing for a little bit. I don't think that as far as alarm bells, I mean, Marco has said that he wants to play Higgins at center. He just said he's not ready for it right now. But you never know. Higgins could come into training camp next year and completely wow Marco Sturm and say, oh, maybe he is ready right now. Like, he could have a great training camp, great preseason, and maybe he does start the year at center somehow, some way. But if he doesn't, I don't I don't think it's a big red flag, because your head coach and even Cam Neely said that he thinks that Higgins and Minten could be top line centers one day. So I don't think the Bruins are planning on Higgins being a winger long term. If they had rhetoric kind of talking about him being a winger long term, then yeah, I'd be right there with you. I'd be upset about that, or I'd be puzzled by it. So I would expect him to be a center next year. Maybe not right away, but at some point. And I don't think there's anything wrong about that. As long as Higgins is playing decent top 6 minutes and is on the top power play, whether he's wing or center in that time is less important to me. I care more about him playing big minutes and power play minutes too. And then the center ice stuff, that'll come. And if he's not playing center to start the year, I don't think it'll be long before he is. So it's not to me, it's not the biggest deal in the world where he starts next year. I don't think I'm at the alarm bells right now. I'm not, and I don't think you should be either, Lord. I think it's gonna be okay. He'll be playing center for this team. He's too smart. He sees the ice too well. He skates too well. I would be surprised if he plays the entire year next year at wing. How's that? That's what I'll say. So if he's not playing center right away, don't let it get you too up in arms. Well, that'll do it for this episode. Thank you all very much for listening, and I will talk to you next week.